I almost feel like the dead zone with quarterback, because yes, you're right. I mean, the guys in like the QB 15 to 18 range are like totally replaceable for the most part. But is it earlier? Like, is it getting to the point where it is the Tuas and the Trevor Lawrences of the world?
So here's a very good example that highlights what you just said, because I agree with you. If you're talking dynasty here, and you have to be a little intuitive with this too, because this is, again, a psychological exercise of how the community is going to view something.
Yes.
And then that's your propensity to invest in it earlier in a startup. So go back and just look at how Drew Brees was viewed throughout his career. Look back at his fantasy career. He lived on good efficiency, some extreme volume, but he had a lot of longevity, right? You could have looked back and said, man, if I would have gotten Drew Brees, I would have gotten 12 years of great production from him, right?
Right.
That's kind of how I view somebody like Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert. Like, I actually would never bet on those guys cracking the top 3 in a given season.
Right.
Because even if they have year-to-year stability, even if they can give me QB 5 to 10 numbers, there's always going to be a Justin Fields, an Anthony Richardson, somebody where you go in a 1-year window. I would actually bet on those guys finishing higher. Right?
Agreed. Yep.
But when you invest in Joe Burrow in your startup, QB 5, QB 6, you're going, man. And I hear this all the time. I don't think he has the ceiling. But that's not part of what you're paying for. What you're paying for with Joe Burrow is, if it goes bad, guess what, JJ? He's QB 6 again.
Right, exactly.
And then the next year, if he's QB 10 next year in fantasy points, he's QB 7 next year. So you have this escape hatch that doesn't exist with somebody like Brock Purdy or Tua. It goes bad for Brock Purdy, it's, oh my God, he's getting replaced.
Yes.
It goes bad for Tua, he's not getting a second contract. Yeah. That is the difference between the two. But if you looked at it and you go, do I really want to trade my future first up to draft Joe Burrow and then do the same thing my next year's first to draft Justin Herbert, and that team down there is getting Brock Purdy and Tua, there's a chance in a 1 to 2 year window, they're just better than you.
Right.
Like, that's in the range of outcomes. But what you're paying for is largely the escape hatch on some of these guys like Burrow, Herbert. I hate to say it, but I think CJ Stroud's going down this range. He
100%.
shouldn't be QB3. If
Right.
he's QB 6, 7, 8 over the next couple of years, unless he just becomes the greatest of all time, where he can maintain essentially like Justin Herbert's volume with Justin Herbert's rookie year efficiency, probably not a great bet for CJ Stroud being QB3, but he probably is already in the Herbert Burrow range of, I feel safe with the asset. Yeah. And I know you said Trevor Lawrence, but as soon as he gets paid, he's in that range.
That's
so there's a difference.
Yeah. I think
that's the dead zone. The dead zone is below the job security guys, where you go, if it goes wrong for Brock Purdy or Tua or insert whatever names in there, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And when it goes wrong, it probably means the production is bad, but what's also going to sink? The dynasty demand. And the reason I brought up Drew Brees is because you know who is exactly like these guys, but never valued like Drew Brees before his injury? Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
8 straight years of like, wow, he outperformed his value in production, but no one saw it coming until you look back and you go, man, Kirk Cousins, he was a QB1 for 10 straight seasons.
Right.
But he was never higher than QB 15 in dynasty value. So that was just a miss. Now, do you want to project who the next Kirk Cousins is going to be? We've seen that tag slapped on dozens of quarterbacks, and it never works out. But you get the point. The difference between Brees and Cousins, yet you're going to look back at their peak like 10-year windows and go, wasn't crazy different from a fantasy production perspective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this goes back to just, looking at dynasty in sort of 2 pillars, one being production and then the other being value, right? You just need to be able to continue to hold value on your dynasty roster year in and year out. And yeah, those guys, that's why I went to Trevor Lawrence, because I do think that it's sort of kind of an inflection point. Like when you're looking at rankings or quarterbacks in the league, it's like, there is the potential for Trevor Lawrence to go south is not nearly as great as Brock Purdy going south. The chance that Brock Purdy outscores Trevor Lawrence in 2024, I'd probably say he's likely to like more likely than not to outscore Trevor Lawrence. But from a value perspective, we're going to lean in on Lawrence a little more. And that's why he's ranked a little bit higher. But I do think that he's interesting because He hasn't shown it quite yet, but I don't know if from like a real football standpoint, we're going to see the Jags not, just like let him free and just move on. Very unlikely for that to happen.